The quantum drives of the Zarn observation vessel, Silent Theorem, hummed with a low, almost contemplative vibration as it approached the unremarkable yellow star designated Sol 427 in the Galactic cartography systems. Captain Zixara, a veteran of over 300 planetary surveys, had long since perfected the art of clinical detachment. Countless civilizations had passed under the ship's sophisticated sensors, most primitive, many unremarkable, some promising, but ultimately disappointing. Earth promised to be different. Initial long-range scans had been perplexing. The planet's electromagnetic emissions were chaotic, a cacophony of signals that defied the Zarn's standard communication analysis protocols. Where most developing civilizations produced predictable, uniform broadcast patterns, this world generated a constant storm of information that seemed to follow no logical structure. Analyzing communication bands, reported First Analyst Krentok, his multi-jointed appendages dancing across holographic interfaces. The translation matrix struggled, consuming unprecedented computational power to make sense of the signals. A news broadcast from a place called New York flickered into comprehension. A human in a crisp suit discussed global climate negotiations, while simultaneous split-screen images showed protests, scientific conferences, and economic discussions. In the same moment, another signal from Tokyo detailed a breakthrough in quantum computing, while a third from Lagos highlighted a new agricultural technology designed to combat drought. Zixara's secondary sensory cluster pulsed with confusion. Most developing civilizations focused narrowly on survival, on territorial expansion, on technological progression. Humans seemed to do everything simultaneously, their attention fractured yet somehow cohesive. The first direct communication came unexpectedly from a research station in Antarctica. The location itself was a statistical anomaly, a human outpost in one of the most inhospitable environments on their planet. The signal was clear, direct, and utterly unexpected. Zarn observation vessel Silent Theorem. This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the McMurdo Amundsen International Research Complex. We've been tracking your approach for approximately 72 standard hours. Shall we talk? The message was remarkable not for its content, but for its tone. No fear, no subservience, no aggressive posturing. Just a simple, direct invitation to communication. Zixara's communication specialist ran multiple verification protocols. The message was genuine, unencrypted, sent on an open channel that invited response. It violated every first contact protocol the Zarn Collective had developed over millennia of galactic exploration. Response. Ask Krentok, appendages hovering uncertainly over the communication interface. Zixara's decision was instantaneous. Affirmative. Full diplomatic communication protocols. The response was equally surprising. Dr. Rodriguez appeared on the main view screen, her environment clearly a research station with advanced equipment visible behind her. She wore what appeared to be standard cold weather research gear, a steaming beverage beside her computer terminal. "Welcome," she said simply. "I imagine you have questions." Krentok's translation matrix worked overtime. The human's body language suggested neither submission nor aggression, a nuanced communication style that immediately challenged the Zarn's understanding of potential first contact scenarios. What the Zarn didn't know, what they couldn't yet understand, was that this moment marked more than first contact. It was the beginning of a relationship that would fundamentally reshape galactic civilization. Humanity was entering the galactic stage, and they were bringing something entirely unexpected: themselves. The Lyrian delegation arrived precisely 37 standard Earth days after first contact, their crystalline bodies shifting with complex emotional patterns that would have been invisible to less perceptive observers. Dr. Marcus Chen stood in the specially prepared reception chamber, his quantum biotechnology team assembled with a mixture of scientific curiosity and barely contained excitement. The Lyrians were renowned across known space as the most advanced medical civilization in the galactic quadrant. Their bodies were living repositories of scientific knowledge, capable of adapting and transforming at a cellular level that defied traditional biological understanding. Centuries of survival against multiple aggressive civilizations had honed their species into living embodiments of adaptive resilience. What they did not expect was humanity's approach. Where previous galactic civilizations had treated the Lyrians as a resource to be studied or a technology to be acquired, the humans presented something entirely different: genuine partnership. "We're not here to take," Dr. Chen explained during the first collaborative session, his hands moving with an energy that fascinated the Lyrian primary researcher, Zerelin. "We're here to understand, to learn, to collaborate." The initial research focused on the Lyrian regenerative technologies. Their cellular structures could rebuild damaged tissue with near-perfect replication, a capability that made them virtually immortal barring catastrophic injury. Human scientists had long theorized about such regenerative capabilities, but the Lyrians had perfected them over millennia. What began as a standard scientific exchange quickly transformed into something more profound. Dr. Chen's breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Instead of simply studying Lyrian regenerative techniques, he proposed a radical approach: mutual adaptation. The human neural interface technologies, still in experimental stages, could potentially create a bridge between human and Lyrian biological systems. Zerelin's crystalline form rippled with what could only be described as scientific excitement. The Lyrians had encountered countless civilizations, but none had approached them with such a combination of respect, curiosity, and genuine collaborative spirit. The first successful interface was nothing short of miraculous. The quantum-linked neural bridge allowed human researchers to understand Lyrian cellular communication at a fundamental level. More importantly, it allowed the Lyrians to comprehend human emotional and psychological complexity in ways their previous scientific models had never captured. "Your species feels differently," Zerelin explained during a late-night research session. The laboratory was a marvel of cross-species engineering, with environments that could simultaneously support human and Lyrian physiological needs, not just emotionally. Fundamentally, the Zarn Collective watched these developments with growing confusion. Their diplomatic records showed countless failed attempts at meaningful interspecies collaboration. Humanity seemed to be rewriting those rules with each passing day. The research went beyond medical technology. Human adaptability became the key. Where Lyrian science had been meticulously careful, often paralyzed by potential risks, human researchers proposed bold, sometimes seemingly reckless approaches that nonetheless yielded unprecedented results. A neural regeneration technique developed in this collaborative environment could potentially reverse neural degradation in species across the galaxy. But more than the technological breakthrough, it was the process that mattered. Humans didn't see the Lyrians as test subjects. They saw them as partners, as friends. When the first joint research paper was published, it carried both human and Lyrian signatures, a first in galactic scientific history. The document wasn't just a technical achievement. It was a statement of something deeper, a fundamental belief in collaborative potential. The Zarn Collective's diplomatic archives would later note this moment as the beginning of something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't just entering the galactic stage. They were fundamentally changing how that stage was understood. And they were just getting started. The first warning came not from advanced sensor networks or diplomatic channels, but from a small listening post on the edge of Lyrian space. Ensign Marcos Rodriguez, no relation to the diplomatic corps' Elena Rodriguez, but carrying the same steel in his spine, noticed the anomaly during a routine long-range scan. Quantum distortions, massive energy signatures, the mathematical signature of an incoming invasion force. The Krell were not subtle in their approach to galactic dominance. Where other civilizations negotiated, strategized, or sought diplomatic solutions, the Krell saw the universe as a mathematical problem to be solved through absolute force. Their world ships were living calculations, biological mechanical hybrids that processed conquest as a pure equation of resource acquisition and territorial expansion. Historical records showed their approach with brutal clarity. 67 civilizations had fallen to Krell expansion in the last 1,000 galactic cycles. Each conquest followed the same precise pattern. Approach, overwhelm, consume, move on. Their mathematical models predicted complete subjugation with a 99.84% probability for any civilization they targeted. They had never encountered humanity. The Lyrian early warning systems lit up like dying stars. Planetary shields began to activate, but everyone knew they would be insufficient. The Lyrians were scientists, healers, researchers, not warriors. Their defensive capabilities were theoretical at best, a thin veneer of protection against a civilization built entirely around the mathematics of destruction. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez received the initial threat assessment in her secure briefing room. The holographic displays showed the incoming Krell fleet, a mathematical nightmare of precise geometric formations, each ship a perfect calculation of destructive potential. "They're targeting the medical research colonies," she observed, her voice calm despite the magnitude of the threat. The colonies represented decades of Lyrian scientific progress, repositories of medical knowledge that could save millions of lives across multiple species. The Zarn Collective's initial response was typical of their bureaucratic nature. Diplomatic channels were activated. Negotiations were proposed. Committees were formed to assess the situation. Rodriguez knew they would be useless. "We're going to need something more," she said to General Aisha Nyong'o, who stood beside her, already reviewing strategic options. The general's response was immediate. "Mobilization begins in 1 hour." What the Krell could not understand, what their mathematical models could never predict, was the human capacity for rapid, total mobilization. Within hours, research facilities transformed. Orbital factories that had been producing scientific equipment began churning out adaptive defense platforms. AI systems that had been exploring quantum computing were rapidly retooled for combat optimization. The Lyrian researchers watched in a mixture of terror and hope. They had seen humanity's collaborative spirit, their scientific brilliance. But war? This was something else entirely. Dr. Marcus Chen, who had been at the forefront of human Lyrian medical research, now found himself coordinating biological defense systems. Neural interfaces that had been developed for healing were quickly adapted for combat communication. Every breakthrough became a potential weapon. The Zarn diplomatic corps sent their standard communication, a request for calm, a proposal for negotiation. Rodriguez's response was brief and absolute. "These are our friends. Their safety is not negotiable." The mathematical models of Krell invasion did not have an algorithm for human determination. They were about to learn. The storm was coming, and humanity was preparing to be the unexpected hurricane. General Aisha Nyong'o's command center was not what the Zarn Collective would have expected from a military preparation facility. Walls lined with holographic displays showed not just traditional military data, but complex networks of scientific research, economic projections, and cultural analysis. Each screen told a different story of human potential. "We're not preparing for a war," Nyong'o explained to the bewildered Zarn military attaché. "We're preparing for a comprehensive defense of our friends." The transformation was total and immediate. Universities that had been centers of research became training grounds. Economic systems pivoted with a fluidity that defied traditional military-industrial models. Where other civilizations saw war as a specialized function, humanity saw it as a whole-of-society endeavor. Dr. Camille Ahmed, head of the Adaptive Systems Research Institute, stood before a massive holographic display that pulsed with living algorithms. His team had been developing neural link technologies for medical and scientific purposes. Now those same technologies were being repurposed for something entirely different. "Traditional combat systems are predictive," Ahmed explained to his team. "The Krell believe in mathematical certainty. We're going to give them uncertainty." Adaptive AI systems began to take shape. Unlike traditional military AI, these were not simple predictive algorithms. They were living systems that could learn, adapt, and transform in real time. Each potential combat scenario was not just simulated but experienced through complex quantum computing networks that could generate millions of potential interactions per second. The Lyrian researchers watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. Their own defensive technologies had always been theoretical, based on avoidance and scientific solution. Humanity was creating something entirely different, a defense system that was alive, dynamic, unpredictable. Orbital factories that had previously produced scientific equipment now churned out adaptive defense platforms. These were not traditional weapons, but complex systems that could change their operational parameters in milliseconds. A defensive shield could become an offensive weapon. A communication array could transform into a jamming system. Nothing was fixed. Everything was fluid. Colonel Maria Rodriguez, a distant cousin of the diplomatic corps' Elena Rodriguez, led the Psychological Warfare Division. Her team was preparing something the Krell could never anticipate. Where traditional military thinking saw combat as a physical confrontation, Rodriguez understood it as a narrative to be manipulated. "We're not just going to fight," she told her team. "We're going to make them question why they're fighting." Economic warfare teams began preparing comprehensive strategies. Supply chains would become weapons. Communication networks would become battlefields. Every human system was being transformed into a potential defensive mechanism. The Zarn military attaché, Commander Zixnera, watched these preparations with growing confusion. Military mobilization in their civilization was a rigid, carefully controlled process. Humanity seemed to be treating it like a living, breathing organism. "How do you coordinate such chaos?" Zixnera asked Nyong'o during a briefing. The general's smile was something between a predator's grin and a scientific breakthrough. "It's not chaos. It's potential." Quantum computing centers that had been exploring the boundaries of scientific knowledge now calculated war scenarios with a complexity that defied traditional military understanding. These were not simple strategic projections, but living scenarios that could adapt and transform in real time. The Lyrian colonies received the first wave of human defensive technologies. They were not traditional weapons, but adaptive systems that could protect, heal, communicate, and defend with equal facility. A shield generator could become a communication array. A defensive platform could transform into a medical support system. Humanity was preparing for more than a war. They were preparing to defend their friends in every possible way. And the Krell had no idea what was coming. The first wave of Krell ships emerged from quantum tunnels like mathematical nightmares made manifest. Each vessel was a perfect geometric construct, designed with cold precision to maximize destructive potential. Their approach followed classical invasion protocols that had worked with 99.87% effectiveness across 67 previous civilizations. They would not work today. Lieutenant Commander Jack Chen sat in the neural interface pod of the adaptive defense platform Defiant Horizon. Unlike traditional spacecraft, this vessel was less a machine and more a living extension of human strategic thinking. The neural link wasn't just a control mechanism. It was a real-time, symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and adaptive technology. Incoming formation. The ship's AI spoke directly into Chen's consciousness. Krell Battle Group Epsilon. Standard Conquest Pattern Alpha 9. Chen didn't respond verbally. His thoughts mapped directly into the ship's systems, a dance of human intuition and machine precision. The Defiant Horizon began to shift even before the first Krell weapons charge, its molecular structure reformulating in ways that defied conventional physics. The Lyrian colonies below watched in silent terror. Their defensive systems were theoretical at best, scientific shields designed to protect research facilities, not withstand a full-scale invasion. Generations of peaceful scientific development had left them vulnerable, their hope resting entirely on their human defenders. The first Krell energy weapon discharge, a perfect geometric pulse calculated to penetrate standard defensive shields. It should have torn through the first line of human defenses with surgical precision. Instead, it bent. The adaptive defense platforms didn't just deflect the attack. They absorbed it, analyzed it, and began to generate a counter-frequency before the initial weapon had completed its trajectory. Where the Krell expected linear conflict, they encountered a defense system that was alive, thinking, adapting. General Aisha Nyong'o watched from the orbital command center, her team moving with a fluidity that defied traditional military coordination. Each team member was connected through neural interfaces, their collective consciousness functioning as a single dynamic organism. Redirect quantum harmonics, Nyong'o thought, and across the defensive line, platforms shifted and realigned faster than light could track. The Krell fleet's command systems began to register anomalies. Their predictive models showed impossible variations. Defensive platforms that should have been destroyed were not just surviving. They were transforming. A shield generator became a communication disruptor. A damaged defensive platform restructured itself into an offensive weapon. Lieutenant Commander Chen felt the battle not as a series of tactical decisions, but as a living, breathing entity. The neural interface allowed him to experience the conflict from multiple perspectives simultaneously, each defensive platform an extension of human strategic thinking. They're trying to establish a standard engagement pattern, the ship's AI noted. Chen's response was a complex thought that translated into multiple simultaneous actions. The human defensive line didn't just resist the Krell invasion. They began to rewrite the very mathematics of conflict. Quantum communication arrays that had been developed for scientific research now became weapons of psychological warfare. The Krell began receiving fragmented communications that undermined their collective strategic thinking. Mathematical certainties became questions. Invasion protocols dissolved into confusion. 3 hours into the conflict, the Krell had not advanced a single kilometer towards the Lyrian colonies. Their perfect geometric formations had become chaotic clusters, each ship fighting not just external defenders, but an increasing sense of strategic uncertainty. General Nyong'o's voice cut through the communication systems with surgical precision. This is our response to those who threaten our friends. The first engagement was over, and the Krell were beginning to understand that they had made a fundamental miscalculation about humanity. The Krell communication networks were supposed to be impenetrable. Quantum encrypted channels, multi-layered security protocols, and a communication system that had remained unbroken for millennia stood as a testament to their technological superiority. Colonel Maria Rodriguez knew they were about to become a masterpiece of vulnerability. Her psychological warfare division was unlike any military intelligence unit in galactic history. Linguists worked alongside quantum programmers. Cultural anthropologists collaborated with AI specialists. Their weapons were not missiles or energy weapons, but something far more potent: information. We're going to give them a war they never anticipated, Rodriguez told her team, a holographic display of Krell communication networks pulsing behind her. The first strike was subtle. Embedded within the Krell's own communication protocols, her team began introducing microscopic inconsistencies. A military transmission would carry the slightest hint of doubt. A strategic report would include an imperceptible tremor of uncertainty. Dr. Alexei Volkov, a specialist in quantum communication manipulation, had spent years developing technologies that could inject narrative uncertainty into seemingly solid information systems. It's not about breaking their communications, he explained. It's about making them question the very foundation of their communication. Krell society was built on mathematical certainty. Every decision, every strategic move was calculated with what they believed was absolute precision. Humanity was about to show them the power of doubt. Encrypted channels began to leak carefully constructed narratives. Reports suggested internal corruption within the Krell military leadership. Confidential communications hinted at strategic disagreements. Each piece of information was meticulously crafted, 98% true, with just enough manipulation to create maximum psychological impact. On the Krell command world ship, Supreme Strategist Zaxkar first noticed the anomalies. A routine military assessment contained the slightest grammatical irregularity. A strategic projection showed a 0.03% deviation from expected parameters. Analyze. He commanded the ship's central processing intelligence. The analysis revealed nothing concrete, and yet something had changed. Rodriguez's team was doing more than intercepting communications. They were rewriting the very language of conflict. Krell mathematical models relied on consistent, predictable information flow. Humanity was introducing chaos at the quantum level of communication. Cultural databases were their most potent weapon. The team had spent months studying Krell societal structures, understanding the precise psychological triggers that could introduce doubt. They knew exactly how to make a perfectly logical system begin to question itself. Military transmission logs began to show microscopic hesitations. Strategic planning sessions developed unexpected tangents. The Krell's perfect geometric certainty began to develop hairline fractures. "We're not just fighting," Maria Rodriguez explained to General Nyong'o. "We're deconstructing their entire concept of conflict." The Lyrian observers watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. This was not traditional warfare. This was something entirely new. A conflict fought in the realm of information, perception, and psychological uncertainty. Krell colony administrators began receiving communications that subtly undermined their confidence. Military leaders found their strategic projections developing unexpected variables. Each transmission was a precision-crafted weapon designed to introduce the most dangerous element into a mathematically driven civilization: doubt. Supreme strategist Zaxkar called an emergency strategic review. The communication channels themselves seemed to pulse with an unprecedented sense of uncertainty. For the first time in Krell military history, a fundamental question emerged. Were they truly in control? Humanity had discovered something more powerful than any weapon: the ability to make a civilization question its own fundamental assumptions. And they were just getting started. The Krell High Council chamber was a marvel of geometric perfection, a space designed to embody mathematical precision. Holographic displays lined the walls, each projection a testament to their civilization's belief in absolute calculation. Supreme strategist Zaxkar stood at the center, his crystalline form refracting light in precise, angular patterns. But something was wrong. The invasion that should have been a mathematical certainty had become a nightmare of inexplicable variables. Military reports no longer followed their standard predictive models. Strategic projections developed unexpected deviations. The human defenders had introduced something the Krell had never encountered in millennia of galactic conquest: absolute unpredictability. "Analyze," Zaxkar commanded, his voice a cold electronic pulse. The Central Intelligence System began its report, and for the first time in Krell historical records, it hesitated. Micro-uncertainties had infected their most fundamental communication protocols. Each piece of data carried the slightest hint of doubt, a quantum-level infection of their absolute certainty. On the Lyrian colonies, the human defensive line continued its impossible resistance. Adaptive platforms shifted and transformed with a fluidity that defied traditional warfare concepts. A damaged defensive system would reconstruct itself, not just repairing but evolving. Weapons that should have been devastating were absorbed, analyzed, and neutralized before they could complete their trajectory. General Aisha Nyong'o watched from the orbital command center, her team moving with a synchronicity that was part military precision, part living organism. Neural interfaces allowed for a level of strategic coordination that the Krell could not comprehend. "They're beginning to fragment," Colonel Maria Rodriguez reported, her psychological warfare division's most recent analysis displaying on the holographic screens. Each transmission intercepted from the Krell command structure showed increasing signs of internal conflict. The economic warfare teams had been equally devastating. Supply lines that had been mathematically calculated for millennia began to develop unexpected disruptions. Trade routes that should have been absolute became labyrinths of uncertainty. The Krell's entire economic model was based on predictive certainty, and humanity was systematically dismantling that foundation. Supreme strategist Zaxkar called an emergency strategic review. The chamber, usually a space of cold mathematical precision, now felt charged with an unprecedented emotion: fear. Dr. Marcus Chen, watching from the human Lyrian research station, understood what was happening at a fundamental level. They've never encountered a system that doesn't follow their rules. He explained to the Lyrian researchers, "We're not just fighting. We're forcing them to reimagine their entire understanding of conflict." The first cracks appeared in the Krell military structure. Communication channels began to show signs of internal disagreement. Strategic units that should have moved with perfect geometric precision now showed signs of hesitation. Zaxkar's final communication to the invasion fleet was a masterpiece of mathematical desperation. Lines of code that should have been absolute commands now carried the slightest tremor of uncertainty. The perfect geometric formations of Krell warships began to dissolve. They were facing something beyond their mathematical models, beyond their understanding of warfare, beyond their concept of conflict. They were facing humanity. On the Lyrian colonies, the human defenders stood ready, not as a traditional military force, but as a living, adaptive system. Each platform, each soldier, each piece of technology was connected by something the Krell could never understand, a commitment to protect their friends. The invasion was about to end, and the galaxy was about to change forever. The diplomatic summit convened in the neutral space station Concordia was unlike any gathering in galactic history. The station itself seemed to embody the tension of the moment, a massive construct designed to accommodate multiple species, its architecture a complex blend of different technological approaches. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by representatives from the Zarn Collective, the broken remnants of the Krell leadership, and the Lyrian Scientific Council. Her presence was a study in controlled power, neither aggressive nor submissive, but absolutely certain. The Krell delegation arrived diminished. Where they had once been a perfect geometric configuration of leadership, they now appeared fragmented. Supreme Strategist Zaxkar, once the epitome of mathematical certainty, now moved with an unprecedented hesitation. "You will withdraw," Rodriguez began, her voice carrying none of the traditional diplomatic meandering. "Completely." The terms were not a negotiation. They were a declaration. Comprehensive reparations would be paid to the Lyrian colonies. The Krell would be restricted from military expansion for no less than 3 galactic cycles. Every resource they had committed to the invasion would be redirected to reconstruction and diplomatic reconciliation. The Zarn Collective's diplomatic corps watched in stunned silence. This was not how first contact species behaved. This was not how any species behaved. Dr. Marcus Chen stood as part of the human delegation, his presence a reminder of the deeper purpose behind their actions. The medical and scientific breakthroughs developed during the conflict would be shared, not as a weapon, but as a collaborative effort to advance galactic understanding. "We're not interested in conquest," General Aisha Nyong'o added, her words a counterpoint to Rodriguez's diplomatic precision. "We're interested in protection, in progress." The psychological warfare team's final reports were submitted as part of the diplomatic record. They were not just military documents, but a comprehensive analysis of how a civilization could transform conflict into understanding. The Krell were given a choice: adapt or fade into irrelevance. Zaxkar's response came after a period of unprecedented deliberation for the Krell. "We did not understand," he stated, the mathematical precision of his language now carrying an emotional undertone that would have been impossible weeks earlier. The Lyrian representatives, who had watched their potential extinction transformed into a moment of galactic redefinition, offered their own perspective. Their scientific approach, once seen as a weakness, was now recognized as a strength, especially when combined with human adaptability. As the final diplomatic protocols were established, something fundamental had changed in galactic dynamics. The Zarn Collective began to understand that their millennia-old approach to interspecies relations was obsolete. Humanity had introduced a new variable into galactic politics, a commitment to protection that defied traditional strategic thinking. Ambassador Rodriguez's final statement would be recorded in galactic diplomatic archives. "We will always defend our friends. This is not a threat. This is a promise." The station's communication systems translated her words across multiple species languages, each translation carrying the same fundamental message of commitment. The galaxy listened and remembered. In the research stations, in the diplomatic halls, in the vast spaces between stars, a new understanding was taking root. Humanity had not just defended the Lyrians. They had redefined the very concept of galactic cooperation. And they were just getting started.